think, in the beginning, we were a little leery of, citizen developers. We said, what, well, we're not going to let just anybody do this. We're not going to let anybody, play in this space. But I think we've had I won't call it an epiphany, but, we've had a real change in philosophy. As we've thought through our technology as a competitive advantage strategy, we understand that um, technology really, and we've tried to stop calling it IT and really just call it technology throughout the business. Because shadow, what we used to call shadow IT in a lot of cases was, I think, IT just holding on to everything. You can't do that. And so the business said, well, I need a solution. I need something different. IT is not going to deliver it. So I'm just going to go off and do it myself. And IT said, well, that's shadow IT. We're not going to support it. And it became this prolific problem that that just repeats itself time and time again. And I think what automation has allowed us to do is say, we don't need to say no, because we can provide solutions a lot faster and a lot cheaper. And it's okay to provide, a lot of CIOs I've talked to want, it's like, I want end-to-end integration. I want everything to work together. I don't want things working around. I don't want to, have, and what we've been able to say is you can take call it a crawl, walk, run strategy to get there. And say, hey, if it's going to take us a year to go do the integration, well, I can get something up with RPA or some other form of automation, AI/ML, in 4 to 6 weeks. I can put that in place so the business can start the process, and while the rest of the automation is being, or the integration is being built. And then there's other ways to look at that where you could say, well, maybe I don't need to go build the integration, right? If it's going to cost me $300,000 to go build the integration from one system to the other system, maybe I can just use what we have today, and just maybe it's not a band-aid, it's actually a bridge or a true solution that you can look at it that way. And so we've really tried to look at things a lot differently through that lens, and then also to look at it and say, there are, in the low code world of, the citizen developer tools that are available, being able to, give somebody the permissions to say, hey, we want you to do it in the right way, in the right architecture. And we want things to stay consistent. But, if you've got time on a Friday afternoon to go build something, and we can partner with you and through the COE to make that happen, why wouldn't we want to? Because truly we start to not only unlock more business things that we can get done with our team, but when we start talking about unlocking the power of our people, well, there are other people out there who are tech savvy, who can do things within the business, and we really can do more. And those are the same people who before were creating Excel macros and workflows and all these things in SharePoint and all these different ways of doing things that, we've just been able to say, hey, here's the next level of tools in the toolbox. Let's work together on it.
Yeah, and you're extending the capability. And typically those people are closer to the business and they understand the process. So now you're able to get to some of that, I'm going to call it task automation, that you were never going to get to, just because it's not, you wouldn't have the bandwidth or the skill sets necessarily, or the knowledge of the processes to get there, right? So it's very interesting. What two things I want to come back to though for you after is, the bridge comment. I really like that approach, right? Is, hey, does it financially make sense to actually do that integration, or is this a better solution? That's really important. And then something you said earlier, I think, is really key too, because I have this conversation with other clients all the time. It's okay if you have a 26-step process. It's okay to only automate 18 steps of that and get the value out of that versus doing it perfectly and having it 100%. That's okay, because that's still driving value for the organization. Shabazz, what's your perspective on shadow IT and the citizen-led developer? Because you get to see it not just in Coke, but you get to see it in other clients as well that we're working together with.
Yeah, and we get to see it internally, right? And I'll get back to sort of what I think the values are, but I'll just a little anecdote internally. We have an internal lunch process where back when we were in the office, people would like, wait, where do we want to go for lunch on Thursdays? And one of the guys developed a bot just that we could talk to now that you could say, hey Siri, kick up the lunch picker, and it'll just go and do it. So he just built that on the side while he was working and got to show it off over last Therapy Thursday. So it sort of empowers everyone to sort of add value. But if we could step back, like before it was shadow IT, it used to be called end user computing, right? And before it was shadow, people were actually using Excel, which was an IT tool back then that we would deploy onto data, and they would build macros, and they were like, "This is great. I've made my job easier." And then IT came in and said, "Well, there's the business has this all over the place. We don't know how to centralize it. We need one version of the truth." All real issues, and I think that push away of the business and IT sort of happened. What's awesome to see is the citizen-led developer movement. It's really more than the sum of its parts, because it does a bunch of stuff Scott's already doing, right? One, it's softening the idea of bots, right? I recently heard someone that was a power user in the business say, this bot has my back, right? Which is kind of, okay, well, now we're in a different place. The bot's helping this person and they've built it on their own. And now IT sort of enabling end user computing again with platforms and centralization. The other thing that makes this sort of more than the sum of its parts, and all of RPA, the sum of its parts, is every time, and this is not anecdotal, this has happened over the last 4 years more and more, every time you automate a process or a tool or a technology or an app or a system, the next time you automate it, it's just naturally faster to automate, right? Because now the hard part's the process, not the technology. And that's when you're doing it. Now, if your power users in your organization are now doing it, that's going to accelerate how many components are sitting there in your libraries and how fast you can do it. And it also accelerates how fast they can build it. So what I'm seeing now is that panacea we always used to talk about, where you're starting to get that flywheel spinning faster and faster and faster because everyone's coming in. Now, governance models are important. Managing all that is non-trivial, but I think the accelerations you get out of it are real and are happening now. I don't know. Do you see that, Scott? Like, are you seeing some of that economies of scale?
Yeah, I think so. I think we feel the same way, that the minute once you've done, and that's why I think we're starting to pick up steam, right? It's it's the hockey
Learning
stick
curve to get going, right? It's that snowball effect. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And you start to see the upswing, and it moves faster and faster. And so, the more people that you have on board, and we've even tried to get into having people build different components together and say, okay, you work on this end of the project, you work on the other end of the project, somebody else, well, let's meet in the middle on how we get there. Now we haven't fully gotten there. We're only in our first year. But I think we see the power of how teams can work together, and let the business user do the front, I'll call it the front end, and let the COE and the developers do the back end, and how they can meet in the middle to accomplish things in a much quicker way and create repeatable process. Reboot.